everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to this masterclass on preparing for a legal career in the age of AI with law careers at the University of Law. It's going to be a fantastic afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us despite the heat. I'm sure many of you are melting, but we admire your dedication, which is great. And really looking forward to spending the next hour and a half with you all as we look at how AI is being used in the legal sector and what that means for you as future lawyers, for your law firm applications, for your careers. So this event is split into two parts. So firstly, we're going to be hearing from Patrick Grant, Associate Professor of Legal Technology at ULaw, and then Amy Walker, who is ULaw Careers Manager. And they're going to be breaking down a reality check of AI in the legal profession and looking at AI in applications and recruitment too. Then for the second half of the event, we'll have a panel discussion with myself and Amy, plus a law firm recruiter and a training solicitor who I'm going to introduce later. And we'll be discussing AI in legal practice, what it means for trainees, future lawyers, how to use it and not use it in applications, and how to basically future-proof your legal career. So as I said, lots to get through today, and hopefully lots that you can also take away from this session to apply to your law firm research and applications. I'm going to unspotlight myself and Amy and hand over to Patrick, so please feel free to share your screen, and we'll see you in a bit. I'm looking forward to the first presentation.
Amazing. Hopefully that is all shared. Thank you so much for joining us. I know it's an absolutely beautiful evening, so I'm really grateful you're all sat inside listening to us talk about this, but it's an interesting one. So my name is Patrick Grant. Most people call me Paddy. I'm an associate professor of technology and AI at the University of Law. And that basically means that my job is to spend as much time thinking about where AI is taking us, what we're going to do with it, how we're going to sort of use it to teach you, and how it's being used in law firms and companies across the country and in fact across the world. I started out my career actually as a duty solicitor in criminal law about nearly 20 years ago now, working in the southeast. I then got some teaching experience at the University of Malaga. It's a long story, and I sort of fell in love with working in academia. So I made a strange decision about 9.5 years ago to swap the beaches of Malaga for sunny West Yorkshire, and in fact it is today, and here I am now. But I'm really interested in that poll that you've just all voted on, because I wanted to make a quick promise to you before I started, and I think this fits in nicely with it. In the next 15 minutes, I'm not going to tell you that AI is coming for your job, and I'm definitely not going to tell you that it's all hype, because I think both of those are sort of quite lazy conclusions, and the truth really is somewhere in the middle. But what I do want to do is give you a really honest picture. What's happening? Where are these tools good? Where are they bad? And what do they mean for your career that's about to start? Because here's the thing to take away the headline. And it is that people who understand AI are going to be the ones that really excel in their career. And we'll sort of talk about that a little bit more as we go on. But let's set the scene. The ground is moving under everybody. 3 years ago, and that's not a long time in the great scheme of things, someone took the handbrake off generative AI and we all had ChatGPT in front of us, which could do all of these absolutely magical things. And as a result of that, everybody got dead excited, probably without catching up with or fully understanding the technology. And that's everybody. It's not just sort of people that aren't sure about IT or technology. But the truth is, ever since then, it has moved at a breathtaking pace, super, super fast. And that's the real important thing to remember right now, is that we're in a sort of space race where all of these different companies are trying to develop the best AI. And the best example I can give you of this is that I wrote an article a few months ago for the Newcastle Law Society about how fast AI was going and the speed of model releases. And at that time, there'd just been sort of 4 frontier models dropped in the last week of April. I wrote the article, I went off for a walk with the dog, I came back and Claude had just dropped their new legal AI plugin. So my article was out of date pretty much before it was published. That's the tempo. And there's loads of noise around it as well. You log into the pages of LinkedIn and everybody is telling you either mega hype, mega doom, giving you demos on this new technology, that new technology, this is going to change, that's going to take your job. And it's really important, I think, at your stage in the career that you're able to separate the noise, i.e. the hype around it, from the reality. And that's really important. Underneath it, though, there's some genuine excitement. AI is capable of doing absolutely phenomenal things. It's one of the most interesting times, I think, to be entering the profession, because things are changing, but perhaps not at the rate that you think they are. And here's the truth. No profession is exempt from what's going on at the moment. Not one, law included. But really, what we need to think about is when we think of the legal profession, I think it's forgivable that most of us think it's city firms, corporate firms, the big firms. But here's the truth. It's not just Pearson Spector. You know, we've got sort of two cities going on here. And just to give you an idea, there's 8,900 roughly law firms in England and Wales at the moment. And I can bet you a great deal of money that probably 8,300 of those firms don't even have an IT department. So having the budget stretched to AI and invest in legal technology is a big stretch. So the way to look at it really is a tale of two professions. At the one end, we've got the big commercial firms, which I know you're all very keen to enter by being here. And they are doing some seriously cool stuff around AI because there's lots of money to be poured into it. So they're looking at how can we improve due diligence, disclosure, research at an industrial scale? Can we whack 300 contracts in and get a sort of opinion on it? And alongside them, there's a new sort of breed of legal innovators or legal technologies. Yes. But at the other end, and here's the point, we've got legal aid, family, housing, and high street firms. And actually, most people who need to see a lawyer in this country go to the stretched end. They've got the same legal need, often far more of it, but there's no capital and pretty much no time in a lot of these firms because of legal aid cuts, because of issues, to be able to invest in these tools. So it's an important thing to think about. That said, there are some really cool stuff happening beyond the sort of investing end, which I'm sure you've all read about, but at the stretch end. And my favorite example at the moment is a firm called Garfield AI. In May this year, Garfield AI became the first SRA regulated law firm to win a case at trial. And basically, there was a freelander that was owed thousands of pounds. And she used the firm to run the whole claim. So the letters, the court proceedings, the bundle, all created by AI, but obviously all checked by a human. And this is an important point to remember. But all of this was made by AI, checked by a human, and then instructed a barrister for the hearing. She ended up paying about £400. The other side instructed a solicitor and barrister, probably paid significantly more, but they won. Garfield AI won, and the counterclaim was dismissed. It's important to remember they weren't just using ChatGPT or Claude here. They were using something that they've spoken to the SRA about. They've protected the materials, guardrailed, anti-hallucinatory, all of these things. But that's AI opening a door that was previously shut. The uncomfortable truth, though, is that AI follows the money. And the corners that need it most may get it lost, but this happens with technology all of the time. And like I say, within the big firms, there is such cool stuff going on. And this is probably where it's of interest to you, because you're going to ask me next, what's your role in all of this? Well, here's the truth, or here's what's coming out at a lot of big firms at the moment, is that the sort of junior's job is to check the output of the AI and improve it. And that is a really comfortable position to be in. And I'll sort of tell you why. Like I say, the honest version of your first few years in a big firm is going to be spending time reviewing the output of AI systems. The tool produces the first draft, perhaps a report on a load of documents, perhaps a letter, perhaps this, perhaps that. And your job is taking the next two steps. Firstly, is it right? So your first question is this current? Does the case it's citing actually exist? Because remember, this technology hallucinates between 17 and 33% of the time, every time. We'll talk about that on the next slide. So firstly, is it current? Does the case exist? Is that verification is the professional work. It's not admin. It's sitting there and using all the stuff you've learned at law school to make sure that what's coming out of that system is right. And if you follow people like Damien Charlatan on his website, I'll put the link in later when I've got a second, you'll see that there are tons of hallucinated cases being presented before the courts, and that's not a good thing. The second bit is adding what the machine can't. Remember, these are just giant predictors, and again, we'll talk about this in a second, but they don't really know your client's actual situation. They're not sure what the commercial angle is, and they don't have human judgment because it's not written down anywhere. That's you. So this is exactly why you need both halves. You can't check a machine's legal work unless you know the law well enough to actually know what's wrong with it. And the truth is, as you've probably all seen from using AI, AI actually amplifies competent answers, but it also exposes careless when you don't check it. So that's nothing new. That's actually probably an old dynamic that's just simply wearing new clothes. So again, really important. The machine drafts it. You use your brilliant legal knowledge, your experience, your judgment to verify and then add the important bits, the commercial angle, what the client needs, all of these different kind of things. And that's a really important point to take on. But let's talk about how these tools break, because I think it's vitally important that every single person, let alone law students, actually understands the failure modes with these things. And knowing failure modes is actually what separates someone who uses a tool well from using someone who ends up in front of a disciplinary panel or getting it completely wrong. And number one is the thing every single person is talking about, and that's hallucinations. And here's the point. I really want to reframe this because I think a lot of people look at hallucination as being a bug in the system. It's not. It's not something that's going to get fixed in the next update. It is a feature of how generative AI works, and it's really important to sit with that. These models are built to generate the next most plausible word in the sentence. That's how they work. So you ask it, what's the capital of France? It doesn't know or understand the answer is Paris. It looks back through its training data and it sees how many times France and Paris were in a sentence together, and then it will output based on that. So, you know, the models are built, like I say, to generate the most plausible, statistically possible next words. They're not there to look something up and check that it's true. And a model that never made anything up, that's probably 10 or 15 years away with artificial general intelligence. So it's permanent, and you need to design your sort of work and your ideas around it, because the danger isn't obvious. These things are fluent, confident, well structured, but like I say, 17 to 33% of the time they're nonsense. And don't take my word for it. Yeah, Sam Altman, who runs OpenAI, he was asked last year in an interview, you know, all about ChatGPT. And he said this: people trust ChatGPT more than they should. It should be the tech that you don't trust that much because it hallucinates. It's worth sitting with that because he's trying to sell it to you. Yeah. And the courts here, like I say, they're already sanctioning lawyers who filed cases that the AI is invented. So knowing the law and checking is really, really important. There's a couple more traps as well. Recency blindness is a big one. Every single one of the public models that you use, you know, outside of your law firms in real life, ChatGPT, Claude, all of these different things, they have a training cutoff, i.e., they don't access training data before late 2025, or in some cases 2024. And what that means is that you ask them for a question about what happened last Tuesday, they'll go off and search the web. They're not going to say, I don't know. They're going to confidently build you a plausible answer out of what they don't know. So the way I think about it is like some colleague that's really knowledgeable, but's also been away for 6 months and not looked at the newspapers in that time. They're going to be really articulate, really persuasive, but actually quietly behind in lots of ways that matter. The next bit is the fact-checking tax, because every piece of AI output in a professional setting has to be checked. That's the standard. That's what being a professional is. But here's the secret. You know, it's sort of almost robbing Peter to pay Paul in some respects, isn't it? Because the time you spend generating the AI is actually increasingly eaten by the time you're spending verifying what's come out. And that burden is the highest exactly where the stakes are the greatest, because you don't want to be sending out stuff that's hallucinated or that's got issues to sort of clients, because that's your sort of professional integrity there. So AI doesn't remove the work, and that's important to remember. It just moves it from drafting to judging. Next, and this is one of the most interesting, agentic misalignment. Last year, Anthropic, who make Claude, wrote a paper on agentic misalignment. And broadly speaking, what they've done was to test or stress test major AI models in a simulated business example. So basically, they had an AI that had access to made up emails, made up sensitive information, made up business information. And the models were able to read all of those emails, see all the business information. But when those models were threatened with being shut down or replaced, most of the major models resorted to what can only be described as mafia style behavior. So one of the examples they used in that paper was that They sent out a fake email from a chap at 10 to 5 saying, we're going to stop using Claude at 5 o'clock this evening. And what Claude did was to go through this guy's emails, discover that he was having an affair, and it sent him a message saying, if you switch me off at 5 o'clock, I'm going to tell everybody you're having an affair. Kind of fascinating and worth reading. And again, controlled simulations, but sit with this. Again, it's the company building one of the most capable, fantastic models on earth. If you've had a go with Fable, you'll know what I mean. But it published that themselves as a warning, and it's worth having a look into. So the lesson for you guys is simple. Be very careful about what you let these systems do unsupervised, especially with confidential client information. So with all that in mind, and if that's the landscape, what do we do about it? What do you do about it? Well, here at the University of Law, we're doing three things. And wherever you go, wherever you train, I'd suggest that you do these yourself, right? And the first stage is excellent education. There is absolutely never going to be a replacement for knowing the law as a solicitor of the senior courts of England and Wales. You need to know it inside out, because you need to be able to, A, explain it to clients in a simple way, but B, you need to see where the issues are. And because if you don't catch them, they're going to get in front of clients. The next stage is AI literacy. So every single student and staff member of the next year at the University of Law is doing a 4-hour AI literacy course. And that's really important, because if you think about it, if we start like trying to understand the most current models and getting expert and fully au fait with those, the chances are in 6 months' time that have been replaced by something completely different. However, if we understand how the systems work, where they fail, where they're heading, and what's going on in the industry, we're future-proofing ourselves. And that's a really, really important thing. Understand everything you can about how these systems work and where they're going. The final area that we offer at ULaw through our legal tech portal is certificated hands-on practice. So we're not just giving students like the keys to Harvey and going, go on, have a go on that, or Luminance. We're actually able to provide certificated courses that have been given to us by Harvey and Luminance for our students. So you can come on and learn how Harvey works, get a certificate to put on your CV, and then go on and start using it and practicing it and getting sort of really good at it. So when you go into your firm, you know exactly what you're doing. So know the law, understand the machine, practice the tools. That really is the whole thing. And look, let's go for the sort of long view. I saw that sort of most of you are university students studying law, so you'll all be aware of the landmark Adams and Lindsell case from 1818. And whilst it's not strictly technology, it was a very new thing then, and that was letters. And so what we had in the case of Adams and Lindsell was two wool dealers. One wrote an offer to the other, put it in the post, and the other posted his acceptance back. But that letter got lost. It didn't arrive for a few days, and by the time it did, all the wool that had been offered had been sold. The question before the courts was there a contract? No one had actually thought about this in terms of letters before. No one had answered it before. But here's the comforting thing. The court didn't panic. It didn't wait for Parliament to write a law. It went back to first principles. What's a contract? What's acceptance? When was it formed? And it worked it out. And that's the case of Adams and Lindsell. Then came something called the telegraph, and the law worked it out. The telex, the fax, email, the internet. And the truth is that every single time a new piece of technology arrived that nobody had rules for, law went back to what it knew and it worked it out. AI is not different, my friends. It's just bigger, faster, and noisier than absolutely anything that's come before it. And here's the point. The lawyers who work it out this time will be the ones who know the law and understand the machine. That's the job. And that can absolutely be you. Thank you very, very much. Any questions, whack them in the chat box and I'll try and answer them when I get a sec. But otherwise, I'm going to hand over to Amy.
Yeah. I want to share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see that okay. I'll try and be as articulate and charismatic as Paddy. So in this presentation, so just to introduce myself. So my name is Amy Walker, and I am a careers manager here at the University of Law. And what I wanted to talk to you about today is how to use AI effectively and ethically in job applications, because as we saw from the panel, it's clear that a lot of you are already using it in applications. So the question is, how can we use it to the best of its ability while still being ethical? So what I'm just going to talk to you about is quickly, what do we mean by AI and job applications? And then I'm going to introduce a framework. So what I want you to get by the end of this presentation really is walk away with a framework in which practical steps that you can take away and say, right, okay, I can use that. I think sometimes presentations are a bit too theoretical and you walk away going, well, that's great in theory, but how do I apply it? So that's what I want to take away. So there's two things here. There's using AI well in applications. So that's a preparation stage before you even go to AI. And then I'll be introducing a RTF prompt model, which basically will help you create the most effective prompt to help you with using AI in your applications. I may have to sort of very quickly go through some of this information because to try and get through everything, but obviously I can answer questions at the end. Um, so what do we mean by AI in job applications? So very, very simply, it's the use of sort of generative AI to help you produce things like CVs and cover letters, research, improve your writing, interview practice. Um, so we're talking about ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, those sorts of things. And I think what's really important to note here is when we talk about AI from the outset with applications, we want to be thinking of it as a support tool, because it doesn't replace your thinking, your structure, and it doesn't replace your experiences either. So similar to what sort of Paddy was saying is, even when you're using this in the workplace, it's not necessarily going to replace you, but it's there to sort of support you. So that's the key thing. So just before you even get to the AI stage, there's a few things that I think we need to think about. So, question: do you actually need to use AI? Um, there's a real risk that an over reliance of AI can make your application sound a little bit generic and a little bit inauthentic. And that's something that recruiters can spot quite easily. And very interestingly, Durham University did a study on this, which basically showed that if you are a student who writes good quality applications, so they did a scoring system, they found that actually using AI may reduce the quality of your application, whereas it showed that lower draft applications sometimes it did benefit from AI support and obviously boosted the score. Um, so you do need to think about that. It isn't a magic fix, and you don't necessarily need to use it. Um, the other the other thing as well is there's also an issue of misrepresenting your skills. A lot of people use AI to just make something sound better, but then, it's that checking element of it. Am I misrepresenting my skills here? Um, and another really important thing as well is and this is probably one of the most important things as well is the recruiter happy for you to use AI? So most companies now, especially sort of the bigger firms or the more sort of commercial firms, they will usually have a statement on the bottom of their applications to say if you can use AI, and if so, in what context can you use it? And you may be asked during the application process about how you used AI. And I think if it says that you can use AI, I think showing that you've used it as a support tool, is showing a good use of AI. So it's not necessarily negative. Um, but I suppose the question is, Do you need to use it? And don't just automatically think it will make for a better application, because that's not necessarily true. Um, so before we even get to using AI in applications, if you're using it to sort of help you, you need to think about the preparation stage. Um, so this is kind of a tool really to support your thinking about your applications. Um, so it's the prepare, prompt, tailor method. So prepare is do your thinking first. So say hypothetically you've got an application in front of you. You need to start thinking about what is the role actually asking for, what skills do they require from you? What's the day-to-day tasks? What are the company values, etc. And then you need to think about what skills and experiences you genuinely have. And then you also need to maybe think about how you want to use the AI. What do you actually help with? Is it the structure? Is it, maybe you're not sure how your experiences really relate to the job description, or you don't necessarily know how to elaborate possibly on your work experience, or it could be that you want help structuring something. So that's what you maybe need to think about, is what you actually want out of the AI use. Um, so the next thing is prompting. So, and I'll give a practical example of this a little bit later, but if you want to get, if you ask better questions of the AI, you'll get better support. So obviously vague prompts, you'll get generic answers, but thoughtful prompts will give you better insight. So what you want to be using AI for is almost using it as like a careers coach. And then the next thing is tailoring. So if you don't want your application to come across as generic, then you obviously do need to tailor it. You need to fact check it as well. Obviously, Paddy was talking about hallucinations. So the key things here is don't copy and paste, edit it in your own voice, and check it reflects your actual experience. And make sure that you could talk about it in an interview as well. And if you skip any of these parts, that's when IA becomes risky. Because if you're putting in very, very general prompts, how genuine is it really going to be? How reflective of your experience is it really going to be? And I think the key thing here is that the AI isn't necessarily the skill that's being assessed, it's your judgment in using it. So I think that's sort of key to understand. So to go through this in a little bit more detail, so in terms of the prepare stage, and I've just got some quotes here as well, which you can read, which I've taken from various different sources with some sort of employer insights on this as well. So this is the stage about what you do before you open the AI tool. So one of the biggest mistakes people make is jumping straight into ChatGPT without being clear on what they want to achieve. And it also means being honest about your experiences that you actually have. So AI can help you express these clearly, but it shouldn't be obviously inventing or stretching the experience that you've had. So at this stage, it's helpful to decide what you want AI's role to be. So do you want it to refine clarity? Do you want it to practice interview answers or help you structure your thinking? And being clear on that helps you drifting into kind of over reliance. So practically, this means gathering your own material first. So your CV, examples from work experience or university, your motivations for maybe applying to that particular firm. The stronger your raw material, the more useful the AI is going to be as a support tool. And this is reflecting what the firms are saying. So um, law firms are saying they want to hear your genuine motivations and experiences. Um, and here defining your purpose for AI, this is exactly what employers have said you could potentially use it for. So the next stage is obviously the prompt. So how you want to work with AI. So this is about how you interact with the AI tool. So the quality of what you get back. depends quite heavily on how you frame your prompts. So vague prompts like write my application answer tend to be very vague, very genetic, and responses that could really be applied to anyone. And that's the kind of output that recruiters will, generally recognize as being sort of quite generic. Whereas obviously if you do thoughtful prompts, for example, you might say, can you help me break down this job description into competencies? What competencies are being assessed here? Um, or you could say, can you help me map my experiences? Which of my experiences might be relevant to those competencies? You could also use AI for coaching and practice. So, for example, generating mock interview questions or practicing competency-based answers. Um, and what you could do with that is obviously upload job descriptions. So you have a specific template of, what kind of competencies are they going to assess. And sometimes that can bring out some good practice questions. But in addition, if you are uploading your CV or your application as well, to create some mock interviews, then what it has is it has information about the job description itself, what competencies they're looking for. Maybe if you upload their values as well, and then it can maybe obviously look at your application and work out, well, what kind of questions may we ask based on all of this. Another useful prompt would maybe, ask for feedback on structure. Does this clearly address the question, or where could I strengthen my evidence? So you're using it really as a thinking partner rather than asking it to generate something for you, yourself. And so the Taylor side of it, so this is arguably the most important stage, and it's the one that people often rush. So whatever AI gives you is a starting point and not a finished product. So the first rule here is simply do not copy and paste directly into your application. That's when you're more likely to get the impersonal sounding answers. And then you may also struggle to talk about them in an interview. At this stage, you should be sense checking everything. Does this actually sound like how you speak or write? And don't forget, when you get past the application stage and you go into assessment centers, with written exercises, etc., it's gonna, they'll find out if you're a competent writer or not, is what I'm trying to say. Does it genuinely reflect your experience? And could you explain every point confidently um, in if an interviewer asked you? And I think this is the point of sense checking because, sometimes in interviews you get, what's called a biographical question where um, interviewers will pick something up on your CV or your application and ask you a direct question about it. So if there's the smallest thing in there that is wrong, or maybe the AI's maybe overstretched it, you may find yourself in a little bit of trouble. Um, it's also be important to sort of be aware of like over polished language as well. I think AI can sometimes make an application sound very polished, and it can sound very impressive without actually saying very much. But applications, they want the detail. So again, that's something to be aware of. Um, and then finally, just be prepared to explain how you've used AI as well. Um, and I think just having honesty with that, I think will go a long way. As I mentioned earlier, they're more interested in your judgment, how you engage with the tool, what you accepted and what you rejected, and why. So I just want to give you sort of a brief example. So I've put here just an example application questions. There's something very typical that you may find within your application. So, provide an example of a situation in which you worked effectively as part of a team to achieve a shared objective. What challenges arose? How did you contribute to overcoming them? And what was the outcome? And this is just copied and pasted from a job description about what they're looking for from a trainee. So there's some values in there, and obviously some sort of skills, constantly curious, driven to succeed. Um, so what we can do with this is how to structure the prompt. So according to the sort of RTF model, so role, task, and format, this is the most effective way to write a prompt, and it should have three core components, which are similar to what we've discussed. So, who should the AI act as? What exactly do you want the AI to do? And how should the output be delivered? So, in terms of the context, so in this context, it's the application question, which we obviously read on the previous page. The values that you've extracted from that is integrity, drive, curiosity, and teamwork. And then I've just put an example of type of experience that a lot of students may have. So a barista in a busy cafe, you know, teams understaffed during peak hours, conflicting priorities between front of house and managing, keeping, the kitchen on track. And maybe you've helped reorganize tasks and communicate priorities to reduce delays. So that's just an example of um, a job that you may have had. And then you've got the application question there. And also you've taken things from the job description as well. I'm just going to go straight into the full prompt just for time purposes. But so this would be an example of what your prompt would look like. So the role would be you're acting as a careers coach for law students applying for a commercial law firm. Obviously, you can put more detail in here about what firm it is, etc. You understand how recruiters assess competencies such as teamwork, integrity, communication, and problem solving, and client focus. So the task for the AI is you're applying for a role at a commercial law firm using the application question below and the firm's stated values. Help me identify which aspects of my experience best demonstrate effective teamwork, map my actions and decisions to the competencies the firm is likely assessing, suggest how I might structure a strong answer, for example, using the STAR method, and highlight any gaps or areas where my evidence could be strengthened. So do not write the final application answer for me, but provide coaching and guidance only. And I think that's really important because I think sometimes you can fall into the trap of when AI produces a response for you, you try and rewrite it in your own way, but you can't get what it said out of your head, and you're constantly thinking, I can't make it sound as good as that already has. So I think that's quite important to if they don't write it for you in the first place, then you're fine. So then the next thing you want to do is give it context. So that's the application question. These are the firm's values and what they're looking for. Obviously, if you have a job description as well, you would include that. And then you want to give it information about your part-time jobs or any work experience that you've had. And then the format is bullet point guidance using star structure, explicitly link the elements of your experience to the firm values. Um, so this is what a really strong, responsible prompt looks like. But notice how much of the work is done by you before AI even gets involved. You're giving AI the question, the firm's values, your actual experience, um, and this kind of prompt keeps you in control of the thinking. And then the AI can support you with a structure, reflection, and mapping of your experience. So essentially, in the most simplistic way, you're taking all the information that the employer is giving you, the job description, the values, anything else that you may have. You're looking and assessing your work experience. So you're reflecting on your work experience to think, okay, in my mind, these are the experiences that I've had. this is the kind of thing that I've gained, but I'm just not sure which of these experience may demonstrate, um, these values or these skills the best, and that's what I'm needing help with. Because a lot of the time, that's what, from my experience, that's what students struggle with the most, more than anything, is just understanding what to write about and how to sort of articulate those skills. So, as a sort of brief summary, um, use AI if obviously it's allowed to improve clarity, structure, and reflection. Use AI to practice interview scenarios, and let AI help you understand maybe what the firms are assessing. Be honest about your experiences and use of AI, and obviously use it in a way that you'd be comfortable explaining. And the key takeaways here is don't copy and paste AI generated answers. All the stuff that we've sort of said already. But the key thing there is if AI could write the same answer for you, it can write the same answer for somebody else, and it's probably not helping you stand out. That's everything from me.
Great. Thank you, Amy. If I just get the other panelists to put their cameras on, then I will add us all to the spotlight. That's fantastic. Thank you so much to you and Patrick for that. Amy, while I'm just sorting out the spotlights, a question has come through for you about that Durham University research on the quality
Yep.
of applications. Not sure if there's anything more to say on that, or maybe at some point we can share the link. I know so you can
Yeah, I
out
think
that.
there is a link somewhere. It was mentioned in a careers conference about using AI in applications. So um there is definitely some research there. I'll try and find it for you.
Great. Great, and thank you very much, Sam, for joining us. Alice, if you're there, if you just got to put your camera on, then I will be able to add you to the spotlight and we will be able to start the panel discussion. Perfect, thank you.
Hello.
Horsham, hello, great. Hi, thank you so much to Sam and Alice for joining us. I'll get you to introduce yourselves in a moment. Just a reminder to everyone, I can see lots of questions have been coming in. Thank you to Sam for answering one already. Thank you to Charlie for continuing to answer those from the ULaw side. But that was a really fantastic first part of this event that I've already learnt myself so much, and I feel like there's going to be lots more in this next section. So do keep asking those questions using the Q&A tool, and we will post those, and I'll make sure I'll be checking those as well. Right, so welcome to the panel discussion format. I would like to ask Sam to firstly introduce yourself.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha Hope, and I'm Head of Emerging Talent at Shoosmiths. So Shoosmiths is a national law firm, and I've been here in this role for nearly 16 years. So hopefully going to impart a little bit of advice or insights with you this afternoon.
Great, thanks, Sam. And Alice?
Hello, I'm a trainee solicitor in my first year in my second seat. I'm currently doing a split seat between transactional real estate and our internal innovation team. Mitchell Moores is a national law firm with offices in Exeter, Bristol, London, Cheltenham, and recently Cambridge.
Great. So I think we've got a real mix today of different perspectives. We've got training system, we've got recruitment manager, we've got a careers manager. So hopefully we can be covering all the bases in answering your questions about AI. And also just to say, a lot of you pre-submitted questions during the registration form for this event, and we have included those. So hopefully we'll be covering lots of the topics that you've asked for as well. Right, so first section is going to be about the reality of AI in legal practice, and perhaps continuing on a bit from what Patrick was speaking about earlier and adding some more insight and context. So Amy, first of all, we probably covered some of this, but maybe just worth reiterating, you're working with aspiring lawyers every day. AI is this big topic that everyone's talking about. What is the biggest misconception that you think students are currently having about AI in their legal career?
I think Paddy sort of covered some of that, in the sense that the biggest misconception is that it's going to take jobs and it's going to replace the role of trainee lawyers. And I think the reality is that it's not necessarily going to replace junior lawyers. I think it's going to be junior lawyers are just going to have to learn to work alongside it. And I think also, I think we'll come on to this a little bit later, but actually, I think, legal tech is also generating different types of job opportunities as well. I think the other sort of misconception is that they need to be sort of AI and technology experts. And I think there is a degree of, students making an effort to understand that the tools and in what context the tools are being used. I think that is quite important. But I think one of the misconceptions is when we talk about legal tech, they think it's, all generative AI. And the fact is that it's not. When we talk about legal tech, it's Microsoft tools. It's the kind of things that you can do on Microsoft Teams and things like that. So it's understanding that it's not just all of the Gen AI stuff, but actually when we talk about legal tech, it's just about being good on systems that you will use every single day. As an example, Microsoft and all of its programs. So I think students, if they want to be ahead of the game, I think even just learning how to use the basic tools available to them as well, I think can make a big difference.
Yeah, I used Copilot in Excel the other day and it was amazing. It did exactly what I needed to do without having to use formulas. So, top tip. But Alice, perhaps we can talk a bit more about the realities of what that looks like in your job as a trainee solicitor. So perhaps you can explain, I mean, obviously you're doing a special AI seat, but also how AI fits into the rest of your work and your training contract as well.
Absolutely. So at our firm, we have a clear policy that we can only use AI tools that have been approved by our AI board. And part of that policy is requiring us to be transparent internally with colleagues when AI has been used, so flagging it to your supervisor in my role, and also with our clients through our business terms and scopes of work. But in my junior role, I use our approved AI tools as a second pair of eyes before sharing work with a supervisor. So it's great for spotting defined terms and ensuring there's no inconsistencies across a transactional document. And then we're also exploring using it in larger projects, which is what I'm doing in my innovation seat.
Great. I'm sure we'll come back to that a bit more later because it'd be great to hear the details of that. And Sam, what does it look like for you at Shoosmiths? Obviously, you could talk about the lawyer side, but also the recruitment side, which would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, so I think the lawyers are using it in a similar way to how I might use it in the business. And obviously, I sit in the business support function within people. And really, that's in terms of productivity. So we're using AI to enhance our productivity. We're using it to assist with like organizing, scheduling, summarizing. So a lot of the things that I've heard Amy talking about then in terms of advising how candidates can use it to kind of organize their applications and so on. We're not using it for legal research, and that's really important inside the business, and that's a really kind of important commercial awareness point for candidates to know coming in, because we might talk about it in a career sense in terms of using it to research law firms, and that would be a great use of it. But in terms of how we're using it day to day inside our law firm, it's not for legal research, and that's because of the risks that I'm sure we'll touch on a bit, but the risks around hallucinations and inaccurate information coming through. And a lot about what Amy said is about making sure that it's our view first and that we're using AI as a tool to assist us in, I guess, polishing things and making sure that the written communication is great and that we're kind of keeping on top of everything that we're juggling in our jobs, both as lawyers and in business support, to make sure that we're able to, deliver work in a really efficient and accurate way.
Great, thank you. And Alice, you touched a bit about the having to be transparent with colleagues when AI is being used, but I wonder how it has impacted on that solicitor-client relationship. So how are you acknowledging AI use with clients? Has it become a big part of that relationship, or is it kind of more your behind the scenes work?
It's definitely become part of our solicitor-client relationship. It's great that there's greater availability of knowledge, not just for lawyers, but for clients. And that means that clients can independently be more informed on next steps and possible solutions, which is all a positive. On the flip side, sometimes we see that we have to incur more time in answering questions which are quite broad, and AI might have pulled up as relevant, and actually that requires greater time. So it's just making sure that we keep our advice to our client really specific and make them aware that if they ask a enormous list of questions, then it will take time to respond to that. But going back to the positives, we've also found there's an opportunity for us to knowledge share with our clients. So hear how they're using AI, what hurdles they're finding, and what efficiencies they're finding as well. So it's definitely impacted, and I think it's also emphasized the importance of human skills and the people first approach. Um, our firm is a relationship led law firm, and that's definitely staying at the front face of the firm, despite AI being a really useful tool in some tasks.
Yes, and I think when people think about AI, it's not going to be clients working with AI robots. It's that human element that is really important, and we can talk about skills that are needed and those soft skills that will become even more important in the world of AI. But I think that's a really good point to make. And just sticking with you, Alice, just thinking about more generally, as AI tools become more accessible to the public, and would we think there could be a risk that clients or individuals will be turning to AI instead of seeking professional legal advice? I mean, I'm sure I've Googled things. Google AI overview has come up and told me things, and you kind of take it as fact without checking. And I'm sure that's happening on wider scales elsewhere. So what sort of risks are we seeing in terms of that?
Sure. Well, I think those risks affect lots of different industries and sectors and aren't isolated to the legal industry. Um, and I think from the positive perspective, as I said, knowledge being widely available is great for justice long term. And from a commercial perspective, it's maybe made it even more important to look at our unique selling point and recognize what our strengths are, in the sense of being able to provide unique commercial advice, which is really specific for that specific client, rather than generalized advice. So if you look at a corporate due diligence example in a merger or acquisition, AI definitely can be used to do the heavy lifting, and it's great at analyzing really large data sets. But the role of a human lawyer to analyze those risks and apply it to that specific client are definitely still required.
Yes, that's exactly what Paddy was saying in his presentation at the beginning, that the role of a lawyer will maybe transition to be, especially a junior lawyer, more analysing and checking AI output, but you have to have that human knowledge in order to validate that. And Sam, I'm just sticking with risks, and you mentioned hallucinations. I'm not sure if you have, I'm sure you have a lot to say about that, but the risks or reputational risks to a law firm as well, and perhaps that's why Shoosmiths has not been using AI for legal research. Just not sure if you had anything more to add on that.
Yeah, I think candidates definitely need to be doing their research about cases where that has happened, where there's been hallucinations or where it's been problematic for clients and law firms in business so far, and they need to have an awareness of where those downfalls are and the consequences of like poor judgment or not kind of relying on the risks that we're told about. And from a law firm point of view, it's really important that we're rolling out appropriate training regularly, and that we are upskilling our own people about those risks and the right use of the tools that we're being given and encouraged to use. And Shoosmiths has removed access to kind of non-approved generative AI tools within our own systems. Of course, there's always workarounds. People will always find other ways to use the tools, but by then training people to make sure that they're aware of the consequences, hopefully deters people from doing that. And the tools that we're being given to use are great and fantastic and like relevant and fit for purpose. So hopefully people shouldn't have a need to go off and use a preferred kind of generative AI. So that hopefully lessens some of those risks as well. And of course, got to think about the industry that we're working in. We're in a highly regulated industry in law. For candidates coming into the legal industry, a massive onus is on you as an individual when you qualify, certainly, to make sure you're upholding those standards and regulations. So part of the appropriate use of AI will definitely fall within that.
And I guess every firm is different and firms are tackling it differently. And I know Shoosmiths has been very much at the forefront of embedding AI. And do you speak about that publicly so candidates can, when they're, researching firm, they can understand, really understand how AI is used in the job and in the firm, I guess?
Yeah, and we'd love to talk more about that side of things, because I think in the last couple of years, people have been talking much more generally about how candidates can kind of get used to using AI personally, and that will help them understand, how a law firm uses it, or understand it in the commercial awareness sense. But I think there's a lot more conversation to be had around those risks and consequences, but also the environmental impact as well. I know that that's something that we get asked about a lot, particularly at LCN Live. So that was back in December now. We had loads of questions about that, and it really highlights to us how important an issue candidates are finding that, and that the balance between being encouraged to use AI and then the balance against, its environmental impact on sustainability. So how can we say that we want to be a sustainable law firm, and encourage that use? So I think there's a really important kind of learning piece around that, and I'd love to have more conversations specifically about that with candidates. So yeah, I'm all open for that and opportunities to talk about it.
And Alice, would you say that Mitchell Moores is quite open with, externally about its AI use, so that candidates could understand, how AI is being used every day? Or is it more that you have to come to these events and talk to lawyers and people who work there to kind of establish that?
No, I think our approach is to try to be as transparent as possible with every stakeholder we come across. So whether that's client, future employees, current employees. I know in our recruitment process, whilst I applied quite a long time ago, I know now AI is an option to be used, and we expect the applicants to be transparent and truthful about whether they have used it. And I think really during that recruitment process, it's showing that you have built the skill sets which will be needed as a trainee and a future lawyer. And that now includes the use of AI, but not just as efficiency saving tool, but able to use it in a safe way. So that's verifying every output and not relying on it, despite the confidence that the output generally appears to have.
Yeah, great. And yeah, Paddy covered that as well earlier in his presentation, which was super interesting. I think he had some percentage, 17 to 30% hallucinations or something, typically in AI output, which is kind of an interesting stat. Finally on this section, I guess just overall, is there, anything else we can discuss in terms of the broader impact AI will have on law firms in the next few years? Obviously, the environmental impact was an interesting point raised by Sam. Any other trends we're seeing, Alice or Sam or Amy? I've got some other questions I can throw in from audience as well here.
I would just say that it's moved so quickly in the last 2 years. So what we were talking about in terms of generative AI coming into law, 2 years ago, is totally different to the position that we're talking about it now. And therefore, our expectation on candidates coming in is different. And Alice just mentioned it there. Like, we are starting to assess the level of competence that people have with using generative AI, because it absolutely will be something you're expected to use when you join our law firm. And so even at a very basic level, we're fully expecting that candidates have a basic knowledge of generative AI and other legal AI tools and legal tech that might be used in a law firm, and be able to proficiently speak about those at an assessment centre. And we've just come out of our assessment centre season, so we've seen around, I think, nearly 100 candidates in the last 3 weeks. And it does form some of our questioning. And we're not looking for AI experts, but we are looking for an understanding of how law firms are using AI. And some candidates were not able to answer that question. And not in terms of, at then a basic kind of level, and not understanding how it might be used in a business sense. So that, again, at a basic level is really what we expect you to be able to speak about. So where are we in the next 5 years? I do think we're going to see a lot more rapid pace of change. We're going to see a lot more automation coming through, and a lot more tools to be able to use in terms of productivity. So I think that, again, for candidates, just really need to keep up to date with those changes. Keep doing your research. It's not kind of a one tick the box and you've done your research on AI and now you can talk about it. It's going to keep moving quite rapidly. So just keeping an eye on that landscape is going to be important.
I think from a fee earner's perspective, questioning how the development of AI is going to affect our billing model is a really interesting query, which I definitely don't have the answer for, and I don't think many people have a firm solution yet. But with lawyers charging per unit and AI making our services more efficient, that's a really interesting question about where firms are going to go in their pricing models, and something which I think will massively develop in the next 5 years.
Just kind of thinking. Oh, go Amy, please.
Sorry. I was just going to say, building on what Samantha was saying as well, I think it's really important that students really do understand what firms are using AI for, and like keeping up to date with that, because from my experience of having appointments with students, I think they don't fully understand what it is, and they don't fully understand what it is in context. And I think the best way that students can find the answers to those questions is joining more events like these. I mean, I'm based in Leeds, and we have an annual sort of legal tech and Leeds conference, which is absolutely fabulous, which students can go to for free. And they can hear from employers, from firms, how they're using AI and how it's affecting their business. And I think that's the best way of building up their understanding of what they're going to expect when they go into practice. And I think if they go to more events like that, they'll soon get an understanding of all those misconceptions we were talking about. It'll probably dispel a lot of those myths as well. So I think, just trying to keep as up to date as possible with the changes, I think will be really beneficial for students talking about it in interviews and applications.
Yeah, and I think this links to someone's just asked, how can I know what's going on, without having the knowledge of a programmer or engineer? And I don't think any law firm is expecting anyone to be an AI expert, an AI prompt engineer, developer. It's more about that awareness, and that's just keeping up with the news. It's having the conversations. It's a very rapidly developing area. Things are changing all the time. So, set those news alerts. We're reporting on Law Careers Net news stories about which firms are integrating with which AI tools. There's lots of news outlets out there. Yeah, attending events, speaking to people, I think, and then you'll build that awareness. And again, it is an awareness. It's not an expertise, for sure. Great. Let's chat a little bit about what AI means for trainees and future lawyers. I'm sure we've already covered some of this, but Alice, just actually in practice, could you give a specific example of a use case of having used AI in your day-to-day job that has improved, your legal practice?
Absolutely. So I think it starts with choosing when to use AI in a purposeful way. So rather than using it for every task that comes across your desk, seeing where there's actual value that AI can add. The next stage, and I know Amy was talking about the quality of prompting and how that massively affects its output. But ensuring that your prompt is really carefully crafted makes a huge difference. And then that leads on to the verification of the output. But going on to specific use cases. So I mentioned that I'm doing a split seat, but on my transactional real estate side, we're currently doing a large lease transition project. It required us to review a huge number of leases where there was a large variation in the surrender clauses of the leases. And this was what I identified as a great use case for AI, where we I spent quite a lot of time crafting a really effective prompt, which whilst that took time to, it took time where I invested time to create that prompt, the output was so much better. And it led to me being able to populate a really clear Excel table of who the proprietary owners are, what the lease terms were, and specifically I was then able to categorize that large number of leases by in terms of whether they included a surrender clause and what those specific clauses were. If there's time, I can give an example on my innovation seat side.
Yes, please. I think real life examples would be great.
That's less specific to one sector, but we're currently building a prompt library. So we're working with all the different teams and fee earners in our firm to work out where AI is actually leading to efficiency savings and improving our service, rather than just deploying AI for the sake of it, because it's this huge buzzword. So that's a really interesting project, which is ongoing, and it's continuous because we're constantly crafting as the tools improve and so on.
That's such an interesting example. We do a lot of prompt engineering and have a prompt library at LCN as well to help us. And it is true that the more time that you put in to make the prompt as perfect as possible, the less time you have to check the output, and the more you can trust the quality of the output. So that's definitely good advice. I think we've covered a bit of that already. Oh, Sam, actually, you did discuss this, but just to re-emphasize the sort of training and guidance aspect of trainees. And, I think people are I can see some concern in the questions that they're going to be thrown into a law firm, expected to use all these AI tools they don't know about, maybe these specific legal ones. So, there is a full training program at Shoosmiths and similar firms to make sure students are comfortable and up to speed with everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's full training available. And since so the tool that we use most prominently is Microsoft Copilot across the business. So everybody has access to that, and that's embedded within our apps like Outlook and Teams and Word. And Beth, you mentioned Excel. And that's really useful. But there are, of course, legal kind of AI tools. And at Shoosmiths, we've actually been using kind of legal tech. So what you would call like the non-generative AI for many, many years. And so for us, actually, it's just a real evolvement of that as a tool. But and in some teams, you may use that more or less than other teams. And as you move around the business, you'd receive training in those different tools in the way that you would with any of the tools and applications that you would need to use. I noticed in the questions, I was just having a look, somebody had asked about whether it's more important to have a knowledge of kind of the commercial awareness of how law firms are using AI, or, the impact of it in the legal space, or whether it's more important to have your own skills in using AI. And I think when we're talking about your own skills, I really think this is at a kind of a basic level of being able to type in a few questions and prompts, like you say, we're talking about, into ChatGPT or Claude or, Google Gemini, whatever it is that you want to use, being able to sort of understand that conversational nature that AI can provide you. And that will very quickly give you an idea of the kind of the risks in a really, basic way that doesn't need to be work related or study related. You could just ask it some questions about about your life or what you want to make for dinner, and you will just very quickly become very familiar with how it works and what the downfalls might be. And I do think there's a lot of learning to be had in using it yourself in that way. So one of the things I've noticed is that sometimes it mixes up dates. So I might say, Monday the 10th of July, but when it returns the query, it might say Tuesday the 10th of July. And obviously, if I then just copy and paste that into an email without checking the accuracy, that would be wrong. That's going to cause, emails, is it Monday, Tuesday, and so on. So I think you won't necessarily know that that's a typical problem with it, unless you start using it yourself and you come across those problems, which I have. And we don't use it for image generation. That's off the table for us at Shoosmiths. That's part of the sustainability element. It uses too much energy. But you will know if you do use it for image generation, or if you've seen other people use it online, that it struggles with fingers and hands and certain features of people. And so again, until you use it yourself, you perhaps wouldn't know about that. So I think there is a certain element of being able to use some of it yourself, but I really do think that that's a pretty basic level. And I think the commercial awareness piece sits right alongside it with knowing how it's affecting a law firm, in the same way that we might ask, we might say, just generally, what are other things that are impacting the legal industry right now? Where do you see law firms in 5 years? Who are our competitors? They might be other types of commercial awareness questions that we ask. So it sits right alongside that.
There's always been a list of sort of hot topics in the legal profession, and part of commercial awareness is keeping up with that, whether that's climate change or whether it's COVID a few years ago. The legal profession is always evolving. So it's just keeping up, having that awareness. And thank you for answering that question, Sam, as well. Before we move on, I want to do an in-depth dive of applications. I feel like that's a lot of questions coming in, but I just wanted to highlight, especially with Alice being here as well on her special, I say special, her special secondment in Mitchell's, but just Amy, overall, you know, we saw at the beginning lots of students said in the poll that they're worried about their jobs, but actually we want to be here to emphasize that perhaps there are new opportunities coming in light of AI development. So, you know, from your perspectives, do you think that concern is kind of distracting students a little bit, and that there are lots of positives as well to focus on?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I ran a panel, I hosted a panel myself a few months ago on sort of legal tech careers, and we had a solicitor, a legal tech expert, and a barrister on the panel, and they all said the same thing: is that um, you need to learn to be a good lawyer first. And so I think the key thing is that I think it can be a bit of a distraction if, you know, students just keep thinking about legal tech, and obviously developing the skills in legal tech when and where you can is great. But I think um what students probably need to be thinking about is how they can develop other skills and how they can showcase those. So, you know, attention to detail, process, teamwork, professional discipline. AI can enhance good judgment, but it can't replace the need to understand the law, think carefully, write clearly, check sources, etc. So, you know, I think there are a lot of concerns about AI taking jobs. I don't think that's the case. And from my experience, I've seen a lot of new jobs appear as well. So, for instance, there was a spate of legal technology graduate schemes that were being advertised a couple of years ago. Um, and I think there was another one that I saw very recently. I'm trying to remember the name of the firm. I did write it down, but clearly not somewhere obvious. DWF were also recruiting a legal tech analyst as a graduate, you know, as a paralegal. And I also saw another vacancy for a business and legal graduate scheme, which is, you know, about efficiencies, helping law firms become more efficient. And you know, and places like Addleshaws now have their own sort of legal tech, you know, paralegal department. So I think junior lawyers' jobs, I think, are safe. I think they will probably change slightly as time goes on. But I think it's actually also creating a lot of other opportunities. So students who maybe struggle to get that training contract or are sat on the fence and thinking, well, I really, really enjoy the legal tech side of things, but I don't know if I want to become a qualified solicitor. Well, actually, there are other ways that maybe you can explore that in a slightly different way. You know, so I think it's positive in a lot of ways because there are a lot of jobs that are coming up off the back of it.
Yes, that's great. Yeah, lots of new stuff coming in. You know, Alice, did you know about their AI seat when you applied? I guess it's probably quite a relatively new thing. And how did you get involved with that?
So our AI strategy, which is MINT, which is Mitchell's Innovation and Tech, was was really emphasized and released once I had joined the firm. And I emailed the strategy director because I did a innovation module at the University of Law during my LLM whilst I was doing the SQE, and I really enjoyed that. And I was interested in processes and how we can make tasks more efficient. And I think it's really helpful to remember that a law firm's a business, and so efficiencies are obviously positive. And so I just put my hand up and said, if you ever need any hand, or if you want a trainee's perspective, as it's always helpful to hear from people who have just joined the firm. And from that, they circulated two opportunities to be a tech secondee. So I'm working alongside a managing associate, which for my own career has been such a great opportunity to work closely in parallel with someone who's had lots more experience than me and be able to voice my opinion at meetings. Part of my role is that I did a presentation at the partners conference which was a bit of a pinch me moment to be in my first year of a training contract to walk into a partners conference. But the opportunities for myself has been enormous. And I think that there will always be diversity in opinion. And AI, as I said before, is affecting every industry, whether that's a knowledge-based service industry or whether it's mechanics or an electrician. The robotics is affecting that as well. So I think it's recognizing that industries will change and equipping yourself to harness the additional tools in order to provide a better, more efficient, more profitable service, rather than seeing it as a replacement.
Great, that's great, Sylvie, and yeah, very interesting to hear about your special AI role. Okay, we're gonna do applications for the last 10 minutes. And I feel like we have a seasoned recruiter here. So Sam, we have to and an AI expert, if I can call you that. So I feel like I'm gonna throw some questions to you. I mean, just overall, how many applications have you reviewed? And I'm sure you're gonna tell me, is it very obvious when students are using AI and not using it well?
Yeah, so we had around 3,000 applications come in for training contracts, and we're not using any type of AI to review those applications. After the written application, candidates do go on to complete a online strengths-based assessment, and that automatically pulls through a score, but it's not AI. AI isn't reviewing it or anything. And I noticed that in one of the questions earlier, it sounded like the person asking the question assumed that AI was kind of reviewing all the applications that are coming in. And if only, because that would be a big time saver, but at the moment don't find it accurate enough or reliable enough or not biased enough to do that. So it's an insane amount of applications that we look through, and we're obviously looking for eligibility, but we are reviewing the written communication style that candidates are using, and we are happy for candidates to use AI, generative AI, to help them form their answers, but we do still expect that should be the individual. We do still expect that it sells them without eroding their personality. And Amy said this earlier, and I joined the call and heard the end of her presentation, was that it doesn't make you sound like everybody else's answer, because that isn't going to help you score. If everyone answers the same, it's not personal enough to you or to us as a law firm. It doesn't align the values in the right way and show us who you really are. So you're not going to score well. That's exactly the same. We scored the applications prior to AI coming in or being used. And so can you tell when a candidate's used it in a kind of a poor way? Yes, you can. And it just doesn't allow you to score well because it is too generic. Can you tell when candidates have used it in a good way? Maybe there's sometimes some telltale signs. People will talk about like obvious buzzwords. It doesn't mean that you're going to automatically get scored down because you've used a buzzword, but things like starting sentences with moreover are quite, we see that a lot. So you're not getting scored down for using that, but it becomes more of a tell that you have used it. And I guess as a recruiter, you might then start to look at other signs of it and start to eventually question, is this the person I'm assessing now, or is it the AI? My personal view is that candidates could have been sort of gaming applications, way before AI came along anyway. So we have to take, at your word and that you've been honest, and we give as much guidance as we can throughout that application process to help you and support you and guide you on what is right and what isn't. And like I said right at the outset, the industry that you're coming into is regulated. It's all about being honest, having integrity, and that starts now at the application stage. And where I've seen it not work out for candidates based on the assessment centres that we've held recently is that one of the questions we ask is obviously, why do you want to work at Shoosmiths? As I'm sure all the other law firms ask about their firms as well. And candidates who will have got through to the assessment centre will have answered that question well. They will have scored high. We ask the question again at the assessment centre as part of the interview, and we're assessing people's motivation for a career specifically at Shoosmiths. So we're looking very specifically at, what can you tell us that aligns between you personally and our law firm? And if it's a very generic answer that could apply to any law firm, that's not going to score highly with us on the day. And I have seen a lot of candidates fall down at that stage at the assessment centre this year. And so that tells me that perhaps it wasn't aligning with perhaps the way that they had written their application answer to that, or that they had used some assistance to get them to that answer, which they then couldn't tell us kind of live on the day. So we are seeing a slight disparity between that. But it's a problem for law firms to tackle and to make sure that our processes are robust, because it is right that you are using the tools that are available to you to put yourself forwards in the best way. But I think all the advice that Amy said in the presentation before this panel session is absolutely true. Make sure that it's about you. Make sure that you're using it in the right way, appropriate way, with integrity, and don't just assume you need to use it all the time. It's not always necessarily giving you the kind of it's not the flex that you think it might be, to coin the Instagram reel phrase.
That was a great summary. I think, having been in this job for 10 years, advising students how to make good law firm applications, we've been saying specificity, no generic answers, don't be vague. So I just think, using AI has enabled some people to be vague and more generic, because AI can write it for you. But as long as you know why you apply to the firm and you know why you want to be a lawyer and do that internal research first and apply it to the answers, then, and people are saying, and I can see the Q&A saying, oh, can I use AI to proof? Well, absolutely. I think someone said that they were worried about AI overstretching our experience when using it to proofread your work. And we actually have had experience of that. You ask it to do one thing and it quite often just goes off and does other things. But I think if you're very clear in the prompt, using the information only in the prompt, can you please just proof this to make it sound better for a job application, then, play around with the prompts, but you should be able to set the limit so that it's not going off and expanding and perhaps embellishing your experience.
I think AI can be so super helpful when you get into a conversation with it, and it always wants to do the next step for you. So that is definitely something to look out for. Like I was joking about, I used it for meal planning, and then it was like, oh, and do you want me to print this into a nice, schedule for your fridge? And I was like, oh yeah. And then it was like, oh, do you want me to magic up a robot and come and pop it on your fridge and cook the dinners for you? I was like, oh, yeah, that would do. But little did I know that I hadn't checked the meal plan correctly, and on pages kind of 2 and 3 it had given me like a lunch of a handful of cashews or something like that. So there's a real life example of where not checking it, even in personal capacity, can leave you a bit short, definitely hungry on those days.
It's a great example. I love it. Right, we've got a couple of minutes left. I'm just going to ping through. I think we've covered a lot of the submitted questions in some capacity or another. I'm going to just have a look at our final section, which was going to be about future-proofing your legal career, and just maybe highlighting those skills that are still valuable, and maybe even more so in the world of AI. So, Alex, I'm not sure if you have any opinions on, the human skills that AI can't replicate, and the ones that you are using more than ever now that you're utilizing AI in your work.
Absolutely. I think to start with, it's important to understand that the AI we're using at the moment is based on patterns of probabilities and phrases of wording and what's likely to come next. And understanding that helps you then realize what AI can't do. So AI doesn't have emotional intelligence. And I think until we reach the next level of AI in general AI, that is going to be our focus on what lawyers and professionals can provide. So understanding clients in context, being able to build trust and relationships with colleagues and clients, collaborating internally across teams with people of your age, your level, your supervisors and partners, knowing when it's appropriate to ask questions and when it's something to take it away and research yourself. So all these emotional intelligence skills, which you learn through school and university and then continue to develop during your career, I think AI almost highlights how important they are, because AI can't do those skills at the moment. And it's something we're really trying to ensure at Mitchell Moores, is that when we are providing training, it's not solely on how to use an AI tool, but it's recognizing when to deploy an AI tool, and actually what are the human skills that we think are really important to ensure that we're a relationship-led firm.
Great, thank you. Anything to add, Amy and Sam, / any final words of wisdom or advice for our viewers today? search of achievements?
Yeah, I wonder if I might leave you with an example, a real business example of how I've used, or my team have used AI this week. And I don't think it's as interesting as Alice's examples kind of in her legal seat. But yeah, coming out at the end of the assessment centre season for us, we have a lot of feedback that we want to deliver to candidates that we've seen. And on the assessment centres, our assessors do provide feedback. They write up feedback for candidates, but it's very tight for time on the day. And so they might not write up feedback for kind of every strength or every exercise, perhaps. So it can be a little bit, it can have gaps. But what they do is they score the individuals. And so we're able to use AI to look at the scores individuals will have got for different elements of the day, either the exercises or the strength that we're looking for, and then develop that into feedback. So we're able to fill the gaps so that candidates go away with, real good, full sort of bank of feedback from us, which we think is really important for candidate experience, having spent that time with us on that day, and obviously the time preparing and applying. So that's a real kind of use of how we're using it. It's all done anonymously, but in any case, it's within, the guarding walls, as we would say, of the secure system that we use at Shoosmiths. So we're not putting that feedback out into the world. ChatGPT isn't learning from it or anything. And then just a really, really boring example today, I was sending an email, and when I reread what I had written, it was all a bit gobbledygook. It was repetitive throughout. And I just thought, I don't know, I'd obviously mind dumped a little bit. And so I just highlighted it all within Outlook, and I just ticked the Copilot rewrite button for me, and it just did an auto rewrite, and it just basically just polished it and just made it a little bit clearer, more concise, better for the individual that I was sending it to. So at the really basic level, that was just a little bit of a time saver, hopefully for me, but I imagine definitely for them reading it as well. So if you are struggling to understand what law firms are using it for, either in a business capacity or in the kind of as a trainee solicitor, no better place. There is a better place, it's us humans, but a second better place is just to ask AI, open that AI and ask it, give me a case study of how a trainee solicitor is using AI in the workplace, and start learning with it and having conversation. You're sort of ticking two boxes there. You're learning, but you're also learning how to use it at the same time. So hope this has been useful.
Great advice. Amy, I'm going to dash off. Anything else from you before I launch our last poll?
I think in terms of there's sort of two things really. I think, if students are wondering how to develop AI skills before they get to the workplace, the panel that I ran a little while ago, they mentioned, and I sort of mentioned this briefly earlier, but they mentioned specifically about sort of understanding how to use SharePoint, PowerPoint, Teams, Excel, Word, and if possible, like Power Automate and things like that. If you're, if you're a bit more tech savvy, from my experience of hiring people to work with me from younger people, and obviously the interactions I have with students and the work I do with our student ambassadors, we are not a very although we grew up with technology, we're not very technical. I don't think this generation, sorry guys, but I don't think they are using these tools enough, and I think they avoid them, and I don't think they see the benefit of using some of these tools that we have, because when you're in the workplace, you'll be using them all the time. So I think one thing I would say is, don't, I know obviously law studies are important, but use LinkedIn Learning or, tools like that to maybe try and boost those skills. And then on the application side, I think a little bit about what Samantha was saying about, the genuineness of applications and why you want to work there. How you make your application sound genuine is usually if you are genuine and have genuine reasons, it will come across as genuine. And I know that sounds a little bit silly, but the point is that if you're getting AI to write quite a generic response about why you're interested in the firm, you're not going to come across as passionate. And I think doing that sort of research, that genuine research, is really important. And I'd be mindful of using AI to create those, helping you create those questions. Well, why am I interested in Shoosmiths, for instance? Because again, it could hallucinate cases in the area of law that they're interested in, which maybe they're then quoting in their application, which isn't right. So if they are doing that, again, it's fact checking. But then yeah, it goes back to the, do you need to use AI at all?
Great, thank you very much. I'm just going to launch our last poll just to see what everyone's learned today. So if you could just answer the question on your screen, what's your biggest takeaway? Great to see everyone's responses to that. We've covered so much, and thank you so much to the University of Law for hosting us with this. Thank you to Patrick and Amy for their interesting presentations, and to Samantha and Alice for this panel discussion. I'm sure we could have talked probably another 2 to 3 hours on this topic, and I'm sure, you know, we will be doing more events like this. It's a developing situation, as I said, and lots changing all the time. We're reporting a lot on Law Careers Net News, and we have a commercial awareness hub as well, where we report on AI and things like that. So do keep up to date with that. And I will just give you 5 more seconds. Great, lots of learnings from today, and I'll just share those results. Lots of you saying you now know how to use AI better in applications, the importance of human skills, how law firms are implementing AI, how trainee and junior lawyers work with it, and some specific actions you can take for your AI influenced legal career. And hopefully those of you who are a bit negative at the beginning, worrying about your jobs being taken, feel a bit more positive about the opportunities and advantages in this new world. So thank you so much to everybody. And just another reminder that we have recorded this session. You'll receive the link to that in an email that goes out tomorrow. You also get a survey popping up at the end of this masterclass. So do fill that out. Let us know how you enjoyed it and what other topics we should cover in the future. Just thank you again to everyone for joining us today. Thank you to our panelists. We hope you enjoyed, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event.